Welcome to the Alameda County Bar Association and Love Thy Lawyer podcast. Today, we welcome the Honorable Rozlynn Silvaggio to the podcast. She has recently been appointed to the Alameda County Superior Court bench. I'm Louis Goodman, the host of the podcast. Prior to being appointed to the bench, Roz was a Contra Costa County alternate public defender. She was also a public defender in Alameda County for many years. She also did some work with the San Francisco County Public Defender's Office. She has 2 children. Is that right, Roz? 2 children.
Yep.
And we are very happy to welcome her today to the podcast. Roz Silvaggio, Judge Silvaggio, welcome to the Alameda County Bar Association podcast and the Love Thy Lawyer podcast.
Thank you so much, Lou. I'm so happy to be here. And I will have everyone know who's watching this that I got this before I was a judge, and I've proudly displayed it in my office ever since.
Well, thank you for doing that.
I'm a big fan of yours, and thank you for having me.
Well, I'm very honored that you are here today joining us as a judge. You earned that mug by being on the podcast when you were a deputy public defender here in Alameda County, and we interviewed you. And if anyone wants to see that interview, they can just go to the Love Thy Lawyer website and search your name, and that podcast will come right up. Where are you speaking to us from right now?
I'm here in my chambers behind Department 108. I'm not a great decorator, so it's not super snazzy, but it's comfy enough.
And that's in the Wiley Manuel Courthouse in downtown Oakland near the police station, correct?
Yeah, that's right. You got it.
How long have you been on the bench now?
Okay, so I was sworn in on November 1st, so not very long.
Before that, you were a public defender here in Alameda County. And how long were you at the public defender's office here in Alameda County?
So in Alameda County, total, I was a public defender for 20 years, actually. In kind of a full circle moment, my interview at the governor's office was actually on the 20th anniversary of my first day as a public defender in Los Angeles County, that first week of September 2004. And then I was at the governor's office that first week of September of 2024, just prior to my appointment.
So you've had a lot of experience in criminal courts.
Yeah, I feel like I'm kind of before I was on the bench, a whole, handful of months ago, I was kind of a regular, shall we say, in the courtroom. I think I was hard to miss. I was always in Department 11 or Department 115 or Department 112, sometimes in East County, handling my felony caseload.
Well, that's certainly where we met and where I saw you all the time when I would go to court. Can you describe to us the type of work that you're doing right now as a judge?
Sure. So Department 108 is really the only game in town for misdemeanor arraignments and pretrial hearings in Oakland. So it used to be, because I have been a public defender here for years and years, although it's been a while since I've been a misdemeanor trial lawyer, it used to be that 2 or more courtrooms would handle all the misdemeanor arraignments and pretrial hearings. And how it's shaken out now, it's just down to 1. And that's my department.
And how's that going for you?
It's kind of great. I don't know. I'm too new to the bench to know a lot about what the other bench officers think. But I have a suspicion that 108 wasn't like a prized assignment. And I'm thinking that's the impression I'm getting. But I actually really like 108. And I often joke, when I get a day where I have over 100 cases on calendar, which unfortunately happened more than once last week. Today we were at 80, and I see these, cases getting, moved over into the completed queue. There's a little dopamine hit that I get, I'm doing work, I'm taking care of business, I'm getting through the calendar. And hopefully every time a case is called, something happens that moves the case forward. That's really my goal. I hate just continuing cases just to continue them. It really bums me out. Not only is it bad for the courtroom and for, the administrators, the people who are concerned about the number of court appearances before resolution and looking at those statistics, but I believe that it's bad for access to justice for the people who come before me, and often the people who are victims of these crimes who want to see these cases resolved one way or another in a meaningful way, quickly. Especially in the misdemeanor world, these sort of cases can really hang over people's heads like a black cloud. And so I like to see that people are getting information, that people are getting counsel, that people are getting the things that they need to resolve or decide to set their case in a trial court quickly.
I have to just tell you that from all the information that I've gotten, from both the DAs and public defenders and the private attorneys that I know, and of course my own experience in your court, you're doing an amazing job for someone who's been on the bench for such a short period of time, and in a department that I think is one of the really critical departments in the county because of the volume of cases that go through there.
I think it's important too. I think, misdemeanors, you're talking to me who's handled really serious felonies over the last several years. And, that was I really enjoyed being a trial lawyer and handling these cases. But the reality is you have a lot of opportunity to make a difference in people's lives in misdemeanors. I often say this, and sometimes I say it out loud for the benefit of the counsel who are there. But, the difference between appearing on a case 3 times in 2 months or 1 time in 2 months may be the difference between having enough to pay your phone bill that month. People who come before the court are oftentimes employed. They have things going on. Coming before the court is a burden to them. Delaying getting connected with resources like DUI programs or domestic violence programs or counseling, that is a burden for them. And so I do what I can to kind of see to it that people aren't just coming back to see me for nothing, because these are people that are really important and their time is important. And I try to keep that front of mind every day.
You've been in the legal profession for quite some time, and now you're on the bench. What is it that you like about being around the law, specifically about being around the criminal law, that keeps you doing the work that you're doing?
Well, that's an interesting, obviously what I'm doing now is a lot different than what I did before in some ways, but in some ways it's not. And when I ultimately made the decision, to put my name in for the bench, it was really because I was taking account of the things that I liked about my job. And the things I liked about my job were interfacing with people. I think people who know me well would say you are a true extrovert. I get energy from being around others. As I got better and better at my job, I enjoyed my opponents more. I could speak to them about the cases in ways where they could hear me. And I liked it. I enjoyed so many of my conversations that I had with my opponent. I like to spar. I like to spar on issues of the law. And I like to try to flex my kindness, wherever you go.
Yeah.
And I think that there is a value to that. I try, and believe me, I get it. I fail because I get frustrated just like the next person. But I try to be kind and I try to be considerate of those before me. I try to lead with empathy. And those were the things that I did in my practice. And those were the things and the values that I thought I could bring to the bench that I enjoy. I enjoy human beings. They're fascinating to me. That's really what I like about it. It's the same thing I liked about the last job I had, just in a different seat with a different dress.
What do you think is the best advice that you've ever received?
It came from my wedding planner. Before I walked down the aisle, she said, take it in, here is where you are. Take it in. Enjoy the moment. And I think in a busy life, in a busy profession, those are the moments that I try to have with myself. When I put on my robe, I take a minute and I think about the gravity of what I'm about to do before I walk into court. Sometimes I'm running around trying to get, extra coffee and all my beverages lined up on the bench. But really, there is a moment where I take a breath and I take some time. I see where I am, I perceive it, and I stay present.
If a young person were just, starting out, just coming out of college and thinking about a career, would you recommend the law?
I mean, yes, I would. But you have to understand that I come from a place of tremendous, tremendous privilege. And I'm, of course, anticipating our conversation today, I thought a lot about this because the reality is I have spent my entire career doing things that are meaningful to me, right? Things that in my own estimation spoke to my soul about what was important to me, what I could feel good about. There are not that many people that can say that, right? I mean, most of us go to work to make money. And of course, I go to work to make money too. But I've had this tremendous fortune in my life, to have been drawn to the work of a public defender, that it really did speak to my soul. And when I left, I was not done. And that's exactly how I wanted it. I never wanted to be wrung out. I never wanted to be tired. I never wanted to feel resentment or anger towards my clients. I wanted to, for lack of a better description, leave the party while the drinks were flowing and the band was playing. And that is exactly what I did. And I know how fortunate I am. And now I have found myself in this new position where I feel very much the same way. I feel like this role speaks to who I am as a person. And it also allows me to bring my values with me, my heart and mind with me in this new arena. So how could I tell someone that my path in the law wasn't incredible? Because it has been. It has been incredible, really. Does that mean that's everyone's path? No. And there are some people who are driven by different things. There are some people that, are really chasing the dollar. I think if my whole reason for going to law school was to make money, I would have found myself in kind of a tough spot. And if my whole reason for going to law school was to make money, I would have picked something else. As I told you in the last episode, I probably would have sold real estate, or I would have gone into wine sales or party planning. I would have been so good at all of those things. I would have made a load of money. I'm convinced that that's the case. There are so many better ways to make money than to be in the law. But I will tell you that for me, I've had a very fulfilling career so far, and I think I'm only about halfway done.
You've been an advocate. You've been in front of judges. Now you are a judge and you see advocates. And there's a difference for the way the courtroom looks from one side versus the other. And I've said this before on this podcast. I've, had the opportunity to sit as a judge pro tem on many occasions, just doing traffic, small claims, that sort of thing. The world looks so different from the bench than it does from counsel table.
That's right. I remember after my first month or so, I was remarking to my new colleagues, I said, I don't think I spent a lot of time looking to my left and to my right. I didn't have time for that. I didn't know what was going on in the courtroom. And when you're up there, you see things that nobody else sees. And you see things that sometimes you really do not want to see.
And you're expected to know everything. The expectation is that you're the person sitting up there with the robe who has all the knowledge and all the power and, but ultimately.
I mean, here's what, I personally, one of my goals, I think, is to lead with curiosity and to recognize the fact that I don't know everything. And I have said on more than one occasion, on some pretty serious issues, I really don't know the answer. Like, I don't know. I'm willing to hear anything. Like, here's how I'm thinking through it. And there was an issue last week where I said, you are giving me no authority for this position. However, I see that there's an issue here. And if there's an issue, here's how I'm going to think about it. And I am open and ready to hear what else you got. I am not shutting you down. I am like, I'm going to go in the back and take a look and figure it out. And I think that is how I'm going to have to go forward, probably for the rest of my career. I hope that that's how I go forward. I am totally clear on the fact that there are many things that I will and have gotten wrong already. I know that I have made mistakes on the law. I have made mistakes on my demeanor. Not mistakes, but there are things that I wish I'd handled differently already, So I'm going to be the last person that you will talk to who says, oh, yes, I know everything, or I'm going to pretend to know everything. I think my flex is going to be that I am going to be very clear on what I don't know. I'm going to think through it. I'm going to make my record. I'm going to do it much the same way that I did as an effective advocate, which was, okay, let's talk through this. Like, show me what you got.
As a judge looking at attorneys, what can we as attorneys coming in front of your court do in order to be more effective advocates and to also be appropriate officers of the court, in the sense that one of our jobs as advocates is to assist the court in making the right decisions?
That's right. So recognize that I will listen and I will hear you, especially if I don't know something. And I'm also open to the fact that I'm not going to know something. There was an incident, there was a case that was called yesterday, and then this record went on. And I was like, what do you want me to do? Tell me what you want me to do, and then I will tell you if I can do it. I think the thing that I see the most that drives me a little, to use my 9-year-old phrase, a little cuckoo bananas, are the times when people are willing to be very rote with their practice. And they come in, it's like, okay, this is the time that I plead not guilty and waive time and waive formal reading and arraignment. And I'm like, well, did you see? Sometimes I'm like, well, have you seen the complaint? I want people to be thoughtful in all appearances, and kind of in keeping with my desire that, look, always be advocating, and don't think that just because this is the arraignment, there's not something for you to do. Like, do something. I welcome it. Talk to your opponent. Or DA, look at this case. Let's move the pieces on the chessboard forward, 6 steps. Where are you going to end up with this case? Maybe we can do something today. We don't need to just set another date. So those are really the things, because sometimes, recognizing that from the bench, I still have, it's pretty terse what I have. I have, the probable cause declaration. I have some information, but oftentimes, since I spent 20 years evaluating cases, I can see some things from there that maybe people could talk about even at arraignment, or maybe people could talk about more, at the first pretrial instead of at the fourth pretrial, So those are the things that I guess when you come to the court, like, recognize that every date is important. Every appearance is important. I guess if I had to make it concise, that's how I describe it.
Your Honor, I have a few more questions for you. I'm going to save them until a little later in the podcast, because we have a number of people on who I'm sure would like to ask you a question or make a comment. So let's start with Thomas Butzbach. Mr. Butzbach, can you unmute and have your question or comment for the judge?
First of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Wonderful. You just brought up something that really fascinated me, the idea that at arraignment, you should be moving the chess players forward a ways. And I'm thinking that, generally speaking, we don't have discovery at that time on these cases. And what would you suggest what kind of chess moves should I make?
Well, I mean, obviously, like I said, I have very little information, but sometimes it's like there may be situations where you see that there's a problem with the pleadings, or that this is a very, very old case, or that you see that this person has no criminal history, and that the DA has waited, 346 days to file the complaint.
Oh,
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Maybe you can go to the DA and be like, hey, man,
Yes.
this was a bad day for her 346 days ago. Like, in the meantime, she's gone to therapy. Like, what if we, do we really need to put this out 2 months for the next available pretrial to start talking? Or maybe you've already talked to your client and you kind of know her story and you wonder if there's something that can be informally done. And I'm not saying that it's in every case, and you're absolutely quite right, because as an advocate, you need to have the proper information, and you need to, look at the body worn camera, and you need many times, and you need to look at all the things that you need to look at, because we know that, so often your client's version of what happened does not match with the police report. Is that true because your client's right and the police report is wrong? Is it because your client was, a little bit tipsy, may not remember? You have to figure that out. But to the degree that sometimes, like I said, when I'm looking at these cases and I'm like, I don't think we need to come back in 2 months. This looks like something that maybe with a little bit of finesse, because we are in misdemeanor world, there could be some sort of informal resolution. And I'm not saying every case, and I'm not saying that it, and recognizing that I don't have all the information. But
I'm going to use your advice, and I'm going to go with those goals. I think that's a good goal to try to find the nuances.
I mean, if you can, why not? There were many times, and I know that this is not a popular view, I would go for felony intake as a public defender, and how it worked. It was like, this is your intake day, and here is your file, and you go back there and you make an OR pitch, and then you waive time, and I would be like up at the DA's. I'm like, can't we 17B this man? What can I do right now? And of course, 9 times out of 10, the answer was no, but why not give it a go? Why not, push and advocate? Because sometimes when you just do things by rote, you miss out on opportunities that you might have that might be clear.
Interesting. I have one more question that's I've wondered my whole life. When you're a judge in a court, how much leeway do you have to design your own court and the way it flows and things around the courtroom? How much leeway is there?
Well, that's a very hilarious question, given that yesterday I started taking down signs that were put up by a different bench officer in 2016. And just to give you some history, in 2016, in 108, I worked as a calendar lawyer for a short period of time. Actually, it may have been a little longer. I was fresh from maternity leave, and so I was working part-time. And so I was doing calendar work. And there were signs that were put up in 2016 by the bench officer at that time. And I took them down yesterday. And before I did, I took photos of them and I sent them to my friend, who's now also a judge, who was also a calendar deputy back in 2016, also in 108, Judge Glenn Kim. And I was like, can you believe this sign has been here for 10 years? This very aggressive sign. I'm taking it down. And I took some more down. I took them all down, and I just didn't like the vibe. It was like, don't sleep and don't play with your pager and pager. And I just said, I'm taking these down. So yesterday, literally, I took them down and photographed them sitting in the recycle bin and sent a copy off to my friend, who's also now a judge.
Well, thank you for that. It sounds like you have a little leeway.
I got some leeway, and I was thinking of putting up inspirational posters, and I may do like a contest to see who can come up with the best, most inspirational Department 108 posters. Like, hang in there, you can do it, or like, this is just a bump in the road. Like, I don't know. Like,
It's kind of fun to think about, though, huh?
It is fun to think about.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Pritzbach.
Thank you for those questions.
Manjula Martin.
Judge Silvaggio, I was super stoked to see you in 108. I remember 2016 and being in Department 108. That's actually when we met. I remember the signs. I remember the vibe. I'm glad it's not that way anymore. I'm looking forward to your new signs. I wanted to ask, do you have any hard don'ts besides like don't show up in like yoga pants? Is there anything where you see like an attorney doing it? And I'm not talking about young attorneys who are like newly minted who just don't know, but I'm talking about, you know, those of us that have been around the block maybe 5 or 6 times. Is there anything that just is kind of like, oh, no.
No, actually, I'm not even offended by yoga pants. If people wear yoga pants, that's okay with me.
Oh,
Well, I think this gets back to what I was saying before, especially my big don't is when people call a case and they clearly haven't talked to their client. And sometimes when they call a case and then the client walks up and they're like, they think they're appearing 977. And then that person has just been like sitting in the courtroom waiting for their case to be called. I think for me, and these are the types of things you see from the bench, right, Lou, that I wasn't like watching what people were doing or keeping track of what people were doing. I was, you know, as a public defender, I was running all around doing my things. But when you see people just chilling and there's stuff that they could have done between the time that they signed up the case and the time that the case was called, or, you know, not signed up their case, you know, I feel like being together in one place in a courtroom is an opportunity. And so for me, when I see people squander those opportunities to speak and to advocate, that is the big don't. Now, unfortunately, the way 108 is working right now, and I'm trying to do things to change it, we really don't have enough prosecutors to talk with people. I'm taking the bench late by design, hoping that people are talking. And I'm taking breaks by design, hoping to give people an opportunity to talk. So that's my big don't. It's like, don't just sit and wait to get another date.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I did have one more question. I noticed the other day that you said that you don't really like the PTCs on the Zoom.
Yes.
I just wanted to confirm that for myself, for my own personal, like little mental catalog, that PTCs you prefer in person. So thank you for confirmation.
Sure. Yes. And I mean, and it kind of
Can we just define PTC for anyone who's not familiar with the 108?
Brianna's on it. She's like, what is that? It is a pretrial conference. And I think the reason is because you cannot conference from Zoom.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
There's no conferencing. And so and my you know, that calendar in 108 is really, really, obviously, since we're the only game in town, it's very, very busy. And so I much prefer people take lengthy time. Like, in other words, don't come back every month and just pick another date. If you need to put the case out for 2.5 months to do whatever needs to be done and to like have these off the record conversations with your opponent, or to get the information to the DA and like have for the DA to like look at the, mitigation or whatever they're looking at, then let's put it over. Nobody needs to come back and see me and sit on Zoom for 45 minutes waiting for me to just call and pick another date. And the fewer appearances we have like that, of course, the better the calendar is. And so it's my preference that, even if it means you put your pretrial conference out longer than you otherwise would, my preference would be that you're there in person and have a real pretrial conference.
Got it.
Okay. Thanks, Manjula.
Thank you.
Brianna Jackson, can you unmute and join us?
Sure. Hello.
Hi.
I was thinking of a question. I'm a 3L at USF/Golden Gate Law, which closed. Super excited to be here and just listen to the conversation. I'm an aspiring public defender and just curious to hear anything you think would be useful for this particular moment in our political environment, in our economic reality, for how to be of service as a public defender in a way that's going to be conducive to allowing folks like yourself to do their jobs?
A really good question. I mean, these are strange times indeed. So, I was a public defender for 20 years, including in Alameda County. And I spent every day that I was a public defender really loving it. And I think ultimately it's interesting because I think the work has in many ways changed from when I started 20 years ago. Things, and you're kind of right that it is somewhat linked in with our politics, right? Things are more polarized than they were 20 years ago. And I think that's nationally true. I think it's true within public defenders' offices. I remember when I was a very young public defender, I didn't know anything about anyone's politics at all. Like, there were people from all walks who were public defenders for all different reasons. And I think it's a little bit less so now. I think there is something about kind of what's happening in society that's also being reflected back within offices. I think the best thing that you can do as a public defender, and this is just my opinion, focus on the individual client always. It's not about you, and it's not about your politics, and it's not about the public defender versus the court or the public defender versus the DA, right? I think when you become a more well-rounded, successful advocate, you realize that the work is always about the client. It's never about anything else. And it's not about who you are. It's about who your client is and what they need and how you can serve them. So my advice to someone who wants to be a public defender is to keep that in your heart. Make sure that when you're appearing in court and when you are advocating for a client, you know that you're advocating for that client. I know that sounds simple, but it has gotten a little, people can lose their way.
What would be a good way for Brianna to make contact with a public defender's office in order to try and get an internship or get some experience being around the office and actually working with other people who are now public defenders?
Absolutely. I mean, most public defenders' offices have internships. They do on-campus interviews. I know it is it was and it is very competitive. I know that. Don't give up. When I graduated law school was in kind of a downturn market, and there were hiring freezes. I had interned at the San Francisco Public Defender, and that was an office in the midst of some political change. It just so happened the person I was interning for was not an Adachi supporter. So that means, when Adachi came in, and of course for me, I wasn't really linked in or understanding all the politics involved. I just wanted to be a public defender. But that kind of dried up in terms of my ability to go there after law school. And I literally cold called Contra Costa. And I had done an on-campus interview with a PD from Contra Costa, and I had elected to go to the state public defender for a summer instead of theirs. And after I passed the bar exam, I cold called the woman who interviewed me, and I said, "Oh, it's Rozlynn Silvaggio." And she's like, "Oh, hi, Roz, you want a job?" I mean, literally, that's what happened. So I went there, and then, I got passed over I was working as a death penalty law clerk, and I got passed over for, one of the very few temporary trial attorney positions. At the same time as I'd forgotten, I had interviewed with the Los Angeles public defender, and they came calling. And so I thought, well, I'm going to have to, if this is what I think I'm going to do, I have to jump in. And LA is certainly a wonderful place to go and give it a go. And so I did. I went. And then after that, I had, pretty much my pick of office to return to in the Bay Area. I had so much experience by that time, and I had done a lot of trials in 2.5 years. And I actually got hired briefly back at Contra Costa, and then 2 weeks later got hired in Alameda. So ended up back in Alameda County. So you just got to keep going for it, but make as many connections as you can, and whatever you can do to get that experience, because it's not always what you think it is. Like, you have to make sure this is the right thing for you. And so to the degree someone wants to give you a chance, go try it. It seems like when you were a law student, or even when you're a college student, something like a year or 6 months seems like an eternity, but the reality is it goes by in a zip. So you just get as much experience and exposure to as many offices as you can, and to the work, and make sure that it really speaks to what you think you want to do with your life. And good luck.
Yeah, good luck, Brianna. Thank you for joining us. Lydia, you're a nurse. Can you unmute and join us?
Sure. Yeah. I'm actually a wound care nurse. I just wanted to join and just say hi. I like what you have to say. So thank you.
Thank you too.
But yeah, I had the same philosophy that for me, it was the patient, not the client. That's your important thing. Now, as being a behind the scenes legal nurse consultant doing wound care, I think my client is the lawyer, but also the person that he has a client. So I can see what you're saying, but you're talking more criminal. I'm talking civil. So it's a big difference. But thank you so much. I'm learning a lot.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Lydia. Really appreciate it. I just have a couple of follow-up questions, but first I have a follow-up comment to what Brianna was talking about and what you were talking about, which is the willingness to pick up and go someplace else in order to get the experience. And, you went to Los Angeles. I happen to know that there are a lot of opportunities for DAs and public defenders in some of the smaller counties, in some of the more rural areas of the state. And, for people who are willing to go there, there's just some great places to go and get some work and get some real experience in a different setting. So I would encourage anyone, whether it's Brianna or anyone who's, listening, who's thinking about coming into the practice, to think about going to some place that's not where you're living right now.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, I have a couple more questions. Do you think the legal system is fair?
You asked me that question the last time we spoke, and I said no. And I was like, oh, I hope the governor doesn't listen. No, I'm kidding. Do I think the system is fair? No, I think that this is what we're striving for, right? Is fairness. And part of what inspired me, to be honest, I never, ever thought that I would be a judge. I thought that my life would be as a public defender. But part of what inspired me to put my name in were the changes that I saw in the legislature, things like the Racial Justice Act, things like the new Batson-Wheeler, things like sentencing guidelines, things like Calcrim 209, and recognizing implicit bias in our system. I mean, this is a recognition, the legislature's recognizing failures within our system. So it is a work in progress. Is it fair? Probably not. But is that what we're striving towards, right? Is it just? Oh, we're trying to seek justice, right? That's what we're all trying to do there. It doesn't just happen to be like, okay, here's the system we have and it's automatically great. It's great because people are trying. It's great because people are learning. It's great because people are growing and focusing on the failures of the systems. So do I believe in the system? Yes, I believe that it can work. And part of the reason why I was moved to take this career path and to make this change was because I thought that someone with my heart and mind who had served as a public defender for 20 years needed, had something to offer the bench. Do I think that I am the only person or I needed to be that person? No, everyone has something to offer. But that's precisely why I'm here. Like, I want to make the system fair. I want to bring my perspective for all those, decades. And I want to see more people who've had my experiences or others or living in this world with a very important new lens up on the bench too, for that reason, because I think it does make our system better. And I think it does make our system more fair.
Let me just shift gears here a little bit. They say that sitting is the new smoking, and being on the bench by definition involves sitting there and doing the job. I'm wondering what sorts of things that you do recreationally to kind of get your mind off of the law every once in a while and get yourself out there and your blood circulating.
Well, so no joke, I have a underbench bicycle.
How does that work?
Because you're very right. I mean, I sit like literally when they say she's a judge in X county, they say she's sitting in that county. So like I do sit for a living, which is terrible. And so I got my underbench bicycle. I'm not super optimistic that it's helping a lot because I think you have to use it for it to work. And sometimes I get, way too focused on doing to remember to put my feet in the stirrups and start moving. I'm trying to walk. I do work out with a trainer. But for instance, last week I got stuck in an emergency in court and had to cancel with her last minute. So yeah, I mean, I live in San Francisco at the top of a hill, and I will tell you that I will sometimes saunter to my home with someone who is very, very in shape. And by the time they get to my front door, they are like about to pass out because
you run them into the ground.
Yeah. And they're like, I thought I was in good shape. And I'm like, yeah, well, everyone in San Francisco is in reasonable shape because like you're just walking up. And so that's kind of what I do. Chase after my children and walk up and down hills.
Judge, I have two other questions. One is, if you came into real money, $3 or $4 billion, what, if anything, would you do differently in your life?
I would make my husband stop working because he is also a lawyer and he works very, very hard. And I would sure love to see him take his foot off the gas. He's been working since he was 11 years old. That would be the first order of business. I think I would still work. I know I would still work.
Judge, is there anything that you'd like to discuss, talk about, bring up that we haven't mentioned, that we haven't touched on? Anything at all that you'd like to discuss?
I mean, there are so many things. These questions have all been really good and thoughtful about the process. I will say to anyone who thinks that they want to put their name in for the bench, that I hope that we continue to see people from more diverse backgrounds as we are seeing. I want people to know that there is a community of bench officers who are ready to support that. And it was, it was very humbling for me when I kind of realized that I was ready to put my name in, how kind and wonderful my now colleagues were at that time. And I think that would be true for so many people. And I hope some more people take that leap.
Judge Rozlynn Silvaggio, thank you so much for joining us today on the Love Thy Lawyer podcast and the Alameda County Bar Association. We've really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful to be here again with you, Lou, and thank you to the people who joined us this afternoon. I will see you in 108. Thank you for being here with us.
That's it for today's edition of Love Thy Lawyer in collaboration with the Alameda County Bar Association. Please visit the lovethylawyer.com website where you can find links to all of our episodes. Also, please visit the Alameda County Bar Association website at acbanet.org, where you can find more information about our support of the legal profession, promoting excellence in the legal profession, and facilitating equal access to justice. Thanks to Joel Katz for music, Brian Matheson for technical support, Paul Roberts for social media, and Tracy Harvey. I'm Louis Goodman. And you unmute and have a comment or question for the judge.
Yeah, I can unmute. I don't want to show myself because I just got out of the gym and I look like a crazy wild Medusa lady.